The mystery behind Zoro's scarred eye was planned from the very beginning. Oda even told his mentor Nobuhiro Watsuki about it shortly after One Piece began serialization. However, in a 2021 interview, Watsuki admitted that he didn't know the reason and asked Oda why Zoro became one-eyed. To which Oda replied, nothing. He didn't reply at all, and he decided to save that surprise for another day. But Zoro's scar has been planned since day one. Now here's 55 other things that you probably didn't know about Zoro. His overall design along with Luffy and Nami were locked in very early on by Oda, and Zoro himself was used as the template for the protagonist Ryuma in Oda's one-shot manga named Monsters. The crazy thing here is that Monsters is actually part of the One Piece canon, thus I suppose making it chapter 0, or because a chapter 0 already exists, a chapter -1. With Zoro himself being a descendant of Ryuma, and his final attack against King during Wano is a direct reference to Ryuma slaying the dragon in Monsters. Zoro's heritage is it's a little bit tricky though, but what's even more confusing is his sword heritage. Zoro inherited the Wado Ichimonji, which was made by Shimotsuki Kozaburo, who also crafted Enma, a blade which Zoro also ended up with. However, he had to trade Shusui to get it, which was the sword used by his ancestor Ryuma. In total, Zoro has used 12 blades across the course of One Piece, with the most devastating by far being Hana Arashi, the improvised Usopp fusion sword, which is literally named Nose Storm. And you know, funnily enough, Zoro may have named this creation after his own father, because his name is Roanoa Arashi, a man who tragically died fighting against pirates and perhaps contributed to Zoro's early series hatred of pirates. We also know Zoro's grandfather, who is called Roanoa Pin Zoro, which is something you may never find out if you're an anime-only watcher, because they don't tend to adapt information like this. In fact, what they tend to do is tell you outright lies. Zoro's past in the anime is shockingly different from the manga, as he is portrayed as an orphan traveling from village to village defeating various dojos. However, the truth is that Zoro was born in Shimotsuki Village and is related to both Kuina and Koshiro. I'll never understand why they did that, but it's far from Zoro's worst treatment in the anime. During the Straw Hat separation segment, they also quote-unquote expanded on his time with Perona, who proceeded to attempt to transform Zoro into her servant and even dressed him up as her beloved bear Kumashi. The anime does some weird things to Zoro, but other anime series treat him far better. For example, in chapter 373 of volleyball sensation Haikyuu, Hinata reveals that Zoro is his favorite One Piece character. Now, funnily enough, Haikyuu is also translated by Viz, who handles the One Piece translation. So to keep consistency between the series, Hinata actually says that his favorite character is Zolo. Zolo probably being the greatest sore spot that fans have in regards to the official translation, although it came about due to such a weird situation. When Viz first started translating One Piece, they actually used the name Zoro. However, when 4Kids picked up the anime series, they changed his name to Zolo to preemptively avoid any potential copyright problems with the Zoro character created by Johnston McCulley. 4Kids then bombed and went under. One Piece was picked up by Funimation and they changed his name back to Zoro. However, this time Viz did not follow suit, and to this day, they still use Zolo. Unfortunate, but hey, who cares what his name is because he is a murderer. Before joining Luffy, Zoro had quite a dark past, including killing the original Mr. 7 of Baroque Works. Not defeating, not knocking unconscious, just like outright slice killing. Now, Mr. 7 allegedly used force against Zoro. However, so has pretty much every other Zoro opponent since the series began, who did not die, which is all of them. But Zoro has been known to commit other crimes as well. On Wano, he was caught stealing Kinemon's Foxfire sword technique, and when Luffy questioned him about this, Zoro simply replied, "It's mine now." To be fair, he is a pirate. Stealing and killing are hardly out of character for a pirate. And Zoro is by far the most stereotypical pirate within the Straw Hats, also indulging in heavy drinking. In fact, it's such an addiction that Mihawk had to forbid it during Zoro's training on Kurogane Island. He said, "Now Zoro, no drinking until you've done the thing." And then hilariously, Mihawk took a sip of wine because he'd already done the thing. He was allowed to drink. And Zoro's excessive alcoholism likely doesn't help his sense of direction. We all know there's an ongoing joke about Zoro losing his way. Haha, he always gets lost. But he also actively fights against the very concept of direction as well. Specifically when it comes to Southbirds. Zoro has a very, very poor relationship with them because they always know where they're going and he doesn't. Although hilariously, the canonical reason why Zoro left Shimotsuki Village is simply because he couldn't find his way back home. He just got lost one day and was all like, "Welp, better hunt down that world's greatest sword guy." Later going on to meet Johnny and Yosaku. However, their origin story was never told in the manga. Thankfully though, we have the anime to fill these gaps. During a filler episode, Zoro encountered a bandit called Dick, which led to my favorite bounty reveal in the entire series, as it simply states, "Wanted, Dick." I mean, it reads less like a bounty and more like a grinder profile, and it leads to some very awkward online episode summaries. For example, to his surprise, Dick's finishing blow is ruined by Zoro. So I guess we can add that to the ongoing list of Zoro crimes. Fun fact though, this is not the only time that Zoro has defeated a Dick, because the Portuguese word for Dick is pica, and Zoro has also defeated one of those. Speaking of names, did you know that in a quarter of a century of publication, Zoro has never once said Sanji's name? In fact, in the SBS of Volume 73, a very dedicated fan made a list of every name Zoro has ever used for Sanji, with the top 3 being Cook, You, and Bastard sitting up there at number 1. But there were also a bunch of one-off names that Zoro have used, including Clumsy Cook, Stupid Eyebrows, Amazing Eyebrows, Swirly Swirly, Mr. Nosebleed, and just plain old idiot. The Zoro-Sanji rivalry has been going on for so long that many people forget how it even began. It's a common misconception that it started on Little Garden with their whole hunting contest, but it actually began much earlier. Whilst tension existed during Baratie, the first sign of true animosity was during Arlong Park, where Zoro called Nami a quote small fry, and Sanji interpreted that as Zoro stating that Nami's breasts were small, which Sanji then took great offense to, and that's how the first fight between Zoro and Sanji began, over Nami's chest. And just like Nami's chest, that rivalry would only continue to grow as the series continued. Although the Viz manga decided to make this more family friendly, removing any words relating to biological chest sacs, and instead having Zoro call Nami a witch woman. Eiichiro Oda has never shied away from breast discussion though, not even when it comes to his male characters. Oda has officially revealed to us that Zoro's bust size clocks in at 110 centimeters, which means that canonically his boobs are actually bigger than either Nami or Robin's. Oda even went a step further and once drew a female Zoro who does not use three-sword style due to fears of chipping a tooth. Now look, there is one thing that Zoro does agree with Sanji on, and that is the issue of eating ice, because according to Oda, neither of them eat ice. However, objection! Because in chapter 701, Zoro is clearly seen drinking a drink and then proceeding to eat the ice, with the accompanying crunch crunch sound effects. Now in response to this damning evidence, Oda actually claims that this was not Zoro. This was an imposter disguised as Zoro, which during early Dressrosa means that this was someone disguised as Zoro who was himself currently in a disguise. One of his better disguises, mind you, because Zoro is not a subtle man, and when trying to blend in, he often ends up generating more attention, such as when he went full furry in the cat costume on Dressrosa, or his rather sad attempt at becoming a penguin in movie 3. It tends to be much more successful when other people disguise themselves as Zoro, such as when Homer Simpson dressed as post-time skip Zoro in a Treehouse of Horror episode, presenting us with a very bleak view of Zoro's future. In a weird way, as The Simpsons often does, it did predict the future pretty disturbingly accurately, because long after that episode aired, Oda created the bad timeline characters, where at age 40, which is 1 year older than Homer Simpson, Zoro appears as an obese, balding man. To counter this, we do also have the good timeline, where honestly, nothing particularly changes. It's just Zoro with more wrinkles, and by age 40, he has allegedly mastered four-sword style, the logistics of which leave us with only one option for use. Even before appearing on The Simpsons, Zoro was quite famous though. So much so that Bartolomeo asked him for an autograph, where instead of writing his name, Zoro simply wrote the kanji for sword. However, this signature was actually created by Zoro's voice actor, Kazuya Nakai, who within One Piece also plays Soul Death, the wacky horse Pierre, and most hilariously of all, Drip, who is the fake Sanji. Meanwhile, Zoro's fake Straw Hat equivalent is named Manjiro, and he actually has access to an ability that Zoro does not, which is that Manjiro is immune from getting lost. Primarily because he is so obese and unfit that he rarely has the energy to move at all, and when he does, he gets tired very quickly. Zoro himself also gets tired very quickly, just for other reasons. According to Oda, Zoro goes to sleep at 4 AM and wakes up at 7 AM, which mimics Oda's alleged sleep schedule, as he claims to only sleep for 3 hours a day. But that's why Zoro is always falling asleep, because he doesn't actually do a whole lot of sleeping when it's the time it is that he's meant to. Now this has gone on to affect Zoro's mental abilities, but in a very envious way, because you see, Zoro has selective memory, like literally selective memory. He actually has the ability to erase things that he does not wish to remember. This was seen in chapter 491 when Zoro met Kami, and then decided to erase the memory of Kokoro, and thus make Kami the first mermaid he's ever met. However, the fan base does not forget. They remember a lot, and as a result, a subculture has developed surrounding a curious pattern in Zoro's fights. You may or may not have noticed this, but a suspicious amount of Zoro's opponents have been either dark-skinned or in-world minorities, which has led to the online epithet of Minority Hunter Zoro. Now, speaking of race, Oda has stated that that Zoro would finish in 5th place if all of the Straw Hats ran a 50-meter race, but this is primarily because Zoro would waste a lot of time getting lost on the track. Because Zoro is often the odd one out, and his membership to the Worst Generation Club is no exception. After Killer's Smile Fruit incident, Zoro is the only member of the Worst Generation who is not a Devil Fruit user. Now, thankfully, Blackbeard kind of picks up the slack there by having 2 Devil Fruits, which means that we have 12 Worst Generation members and 12 Devil Fruits between them. Nice and balanced. Unlike Zoro's win-loss ratio, which is the highest of the combat-geared Straw Hats. His most troublesome opponents being Dracule Mihawk on Baratier and Chimney on Water 7. Not the child Chimney, but the literal chimney that he got thrown into. Which is something that Zoro really should have seen coming because he had already used Observation Haki by then. In fact, Zoro is the first Straw Hat to use any brand of Haki, using a mix of Observation and Armament Haki to bring down Mr. 1 on Alabasta. This was something retroactively confirmed on Wano, but it's still insane to think that Zoro used Advanced Armament before he learned Basic Armament, but it's a thing that happened. But being the first crew Haki user is great because first isn't something that Zoro sees a lot of elsewhere, particularly in popularity polls where he hangs out a lot in 2nd place. Luffy is always number 1, of course. However, on one occasion, Zoro's 2nd place was even usurped by bread-hating polar bear-having Trafalgar Law. And in the World Top 100 poll, my home region of Oceania voted Zoro in 5th place, putting Nami, Robin, Yamato, and Carrot above everyone else, thus revealing a clear bit of bias in this region. And I mean, look, to be fair, it is so damn hot in Australia, so of course we're thirsty as crap. Zoro remains well lubricated, however, and has even lent his voice to 12 different musical tracks across One Piece history, usually singing with the other crew members, but he also has 2 solo songs, being Eyes of Zoro and Spirit of Zoro respectively. The concept of spirit is interesting because Zoro is very much an apathist in his approach to life. In fact, I'd even go a step further and say that Zoro is deliberately antagonistic towards the concept of gods, directly challenging Enel's assertions, and even claiming that he will become the king of hell. You know, looking back on it, Zoro was also hung on a cross in Shell's Town, so there's a lot of religious irony with his character. But also his attack set is firmly rooted in religion, specifically Buddhism and Hinduism, the latter of which is more evident with Ashura. Other than religion though, most of Zoro's attack names come from sushi. And the reason for this, according to a discussion between Oda and a fan, is because Zoro has probably never tried sushi and has some weird mental fascination with it, almost naming his attacks arbitrarily because he thinks the words are cool. However, something that is very not cool is Zoro's bathing schedule. Along with Luffy and Brook, Zoro bathes once a week, which is, well, look, it's not enough. Absolutely not enough for a man who sweats and bleeds as much as he does. Despite this information, a fan has also asked what Zoro smells like. And much to my surprise, the answer was steel, as opposed to the more realistic putrid pile of rotting meat. I imagine it's so bad that people just fall down in his presence, mistaking it for Conqueror's Haki. But Zoro himself is often mistaken as the captain of the Straw Hats, primarily due to the seriousness he exudes, often leading other people to believe that Luffy is an even more ruthless demonic monster to have someone like Zoro under his command. And you know, it's so bad that sometimes even Oda forgets that Zoro is not Luffy, such as the initial printing of chapter 698, where Zoro was drawn with Luffy's trademark chest scar. Oh, and just about that scar, so many people commented on the Luffy Facts video that they thought Luffy got his scar from Zoro, because there's a fight scene in episode 223 where Zoro does slice Luffy's chest in the X shape. However, this is a non-canon filler episode which never happened in the manga, but it has since given the impression to a shocking amount of people that Zoro is the one responsible for Luffy's scar. To be fair, sometimes the One Piece movies even mistake Zoro for Luffy as well, as Zoro is the only character other than Luffy and maybe arguably Uta as well, who has been the protagonist of a film. In this case, it was movie 5, The Cursed Holy Sword, where we learn all about Zoro's childhood friend Saga, who has been corrupted by a magical sword, and also there's magical orbs, and also it's a bad movie. It's a really bad movie. One of, if not the worst, One Piece movies. Swords magically coming to life aren't all that weird in the series though. In fact, Oda has anthropomorphized 3 of Zoro's swords, which revealed to us that the blades resemble their creators. But it doesn't stop there. All 3 of Zoro's earrings have names and personalities, collectively referred to as the Pierce Triplet Sisters, and his Haramaki has a seductive persona named Haramakiko. Such artfully crafted objects, and Zoro is a popular target for art, specifically street art, with a whole range of amazing Zoro tributes being placed throughout the world, with my favorite one being from Kalama, Chile. Zoro has transcended Page and become part of popular culture at large, which is only reinforced by the fact that he is the only Straw Hat to have canonically fought against Batman. Granted, it was this Batman, but and that's still pretty cool. And if you're an anime watcher, Luffy also fought Batman, and Batman, to his credit, held his own pretty damn well. In the anime, Batman can use armament Haki so powerful that he blocked Luffy, and by all rights, Batman should be the one fighting Kaido right now instead of Luffy. Meanwhile, instead of Shellstown, Luffy was supposed to encounter Zoro as part of Buggy's crew in Orangetown. They were supposed to be something of a villainous family unit, not biologically, but more like a Yakuza-style arrangement. And look, that never happened, but Zoro did keep his cold and sometimes quite antagonistic attitude. A great example of which are his interactions surrounding Vivi, as he is by far the Straw Hat with the most neutral attitude towards her. It's like he has something against her that he refuses to say out loud. He's also the only one who didn't try to see her naked during the bath scene in Alabasta. I mean, even Cobra tried, and he's her dad. Sorry, he was her dad. He's dead now. But look, when does a man die? It's when he's forgotten. And Zoro will never be forgotten, primarily because he has a life-size golden statue in Oda's hometown of Kumamoto. And for the unveiling ceremony, the Kumamoto town mascot even cosplayed Zoro, which is pretty impressive. Admittedly, I cannot beat that. But I do have a close second, because I also have a life-size Zoro statue looking perpetually upset in my office. And that's 56 things that you may or may not have known about Zoro.